In 1985, a Japanese agricultural researcher named Tsukihashi arrived in the Peruvian Andes carrying a notebook and a question. He had been sent by a team at the National Institute of Agrobiological Sciences in Tsukuba to study a root vegetable that local farmers were selling at every market stall between Cusco and Cajamarca. The root was massive, sometimes weighing over a kilogram. The skin was brown and ugly, scarred by soil, shaped like a swollen sweet potato left too long in the ground. But when he peeled it and bit into the raw flesh, he stopped writing. It tasted like an apple, crisp, juicy, cold, sweet. Not starchy, not earthy, not like any root vegetable he had eaten in 30 years of agricultural research. He tested the sugar, fructooligosaccharides, a molecule that tastes sweet on the tongue but passes through the human digestive system completely unmetabolized. The body does not register it as sugar. Insulin does not spike. Blood glucose does not rise. The sweetness is real. The calories are not. He asked the women selling it at the Cajamarca market how long their families had been growing it. They laughed. Their grandmothers grew it. Their grandmothers' grandmothers grew it. Nobody remembered a time before it existed. It was always in the ground. Tsukihashi filled 3 crates with tubers, packed them in straw, and flew them back to Japan. Within 5 years, Japanese farmers were growing it commercially in Hokkaido and Kyushu. Within 10 years, it appeared in Japanese supermarkets under the name yacon, sold alongside daikon and burdock as an everyday health food. Today, Japan grows more yacon than any country outside South America. But the country where the root is native and the country that could benefit from it most, the United States, has never heard of it. This is yacon, Smolanthus sonquifolius. A member of the sunflower family that grows 6 to 8 feet tall, produces clusters of roots the size of a man's forearm and delivers a sweetness that the human body cannot convert into fat. And the $100 billion sugar industry needs you to keep thinking sweetness requires their product. If these stories matter to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every share helps preserve what they tried to erase. The archive opens in the Andes Mountains roughly 1,200 years ago. Long before the Inca Empire rose to power, farming communities in what is now Peru were cultivating a plant that towered above their heads. Broad leaves caught the mountain sun. Small yellow flowers clustered at the top, looking like tiny sunflowers, because that is exactly what they were. Yacon belongs to the same botanical family as the sunflower, but the value was invisible. Underground, each plant produced a cluster of thick tuberous roots, 4 to 8 per plant, some weighing a kilogram each. They called it yacon in Quechua. The word meant watery, a reference to the juicy crunch that made it unlike any other root in their fields. Farmers planted it at the edges of their terraces where the soil was loose and deep. Children ate it raw, pulling roots from the ground and biting into them like fruit on a hot afternoon. Women sliced it thin and dried it in the mountain sun, creating a sweet, preserved food that lasted through the cold months. Men carried it on long journeys across mountain passes as a source of hydration, the root being nearly 90% water by weight. When the Inca Empire consolidated power around 1438 under Pachacuti, yacon was already ancient. It was not sacred like quinoa. It was not ceremonial like coca. It was not a prestige crop reserved for royalty. It was ordinary. It was everywhere. The crop nobody talked about because it never failed. It grew in poor soil at elevations where corn struggled. It survived frost at 11,000 feet that killed bean plants overnight. It came back every year from the same rootstock without replanting, without purchased seed, without any intervention at all. And it tasted sweet in a world where sweetness was rare and precious. The Inca road system stretched 25,000 miles across the Andes. Relay runners called chasquis carried messages between cities at altitude. What sustained them on passes above 14,000 feet was not coca alone. Dried yacon slices provided quick energy without the crash of sugar. The root was light, portable, and naturally preserved by the dry mountain air. Archaeological sites across the Andes have yielded carbonized yacon remains dating back centuries, always found alongside the staples: potato, quinoa, corn, and beans. The Spanish arrived in 1532. Francisco Pizarro and 168 conquistadors dismantled the Inca Empire in a decade. They cataloged everything of value. Gold and silver filled their ships. Potatoes would feed Europe for centuries. Tomatoes would reshape Italian cooking. Corn would dominate global agriculture. Peppers would transform cuisines from Hungary to Thailand. But yacon never made the list. The reason was simple. The tubers spoiled. Within 3 to 5 days of harvest, the crisp flesh turned soft and brown. Oxidation destroyed the texture that made it remarkable. Potatoes lasted months in dark cellars. Corn dried in the sun and shipped in wooden holds across oceans. Yacon rotted before a mule train could carry it from the highlands to the coast. The Spanish wanted crops they could control, store, tax, and export across an empire that spanned 2 hemispheres. A root that had to be eaten fresh, that could not survive a transatlantic crossing, that grew back on its own without purchased seed, was worthless to a system built on extraction and control. So yacon stayed in the Andes. For 400 years after conquest, it remained a local crop invisible to global agriculture. Farmers in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia grew it the way their ancestors had. No breeding programs improved it. No agricultural investment developed it. No export market demanded it. Just families planting crowns in October and harvesting roots in June. The same cycle repeated for 1,000 years, quiet and unbroken. Then something happened in a laboratory that should have changed everything. Dr. Susana Genta at the Universidad Nacional de Tucumán in Argentina had been studying yacon's unusual chemistry since the early 2000s. The sweetness in yacon does not come from glucose, fructose, or sucrose, the sugars that spike blood, feed diabetes, and drive obesity. It comes from fructooligosaccharides, FOS, short chains of fructose molecules bonded together in a configuration that human digestive enzymes cannot break apart. Your tongue registers FOS as sweet. Your stomach and small intestine pass it through completely untouched. It arrives in your colon intact, where it becomes something entirely different. Food for bacteria, bifidobacterium and lactobacillus, the exact species that pharmaceutical companies culture in factories and sell in $40 probiotic capsules, feed on FOS. They multiply rapidly. They produce short-chain fatty acids, primarily butyrate and propionate, that lower gut pH, block pathogenic bacteria, reduce systemic inflammation, and dramatically improve calcium and magnesium absorption. One raw yacon root delivers more prebiotic fiber than an entire bottle of supplements, for free, from the ground. But Genta was not studying gut bacteria. She was studying diabetes and obesity. In 2009, she published a clinical trial in the journal Clinical Nutrition that made researchers across South America sit up. 55 obese women with insulin resistance were divided into two groups. One group consumed yacon syrup daily, roughly 4 teaspoons, providing 0.29 grams of FOS per kilogram of body weight. The other received a placebo syrup with no FOS. After 120 days, the yacon group lost an average of 15 kilograms. Their fasting insulin dropped by 42%. Their LDL cholesterol fell significantly. Their bowel transit time improved. The placebo group showed no meaningful change in any metric. 15 kilograms in 4 months from a root syrup. The study had limitations. The sample size was modest. Some subjects dropped out due to digestive discomfort from the FOS, primarily bloating and gas that subsides as gut bacteria adapt. But the mechanism was physiologically clear. Yacon delivers sweetness without triggering insulin response. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria that regulate metabolic function. It produces satiety without caloric load because nearly 90% of the root is water and indigestible fiber. The body registers fullness without registering fuel. The findings did not stand alone. A 2013 study published in Food and Chemical Toxicology confirmed that yacon leaf extract reduced blood glucose levels in diabetic rats by 38% within 14 days. Researchers at the National University of La Plata in Argentina demonstrated that yacon FOS increased bifidobacterial populations in the human gut by 400% within 3 weeks of daily consumption. A 2017 review published in the Journal of Functional Foods compiled 47 separate studies documenting yacon's prebiotic, hypoglycemic, and antioxidant properties across multiple research institutions and countries. 47 studies. The science was not preliminary. It was building toward a conclusion that no one with a financial interest wanted to reach. Here is where the story turns. FOS, the compound that makes yacon medically extraordinary, is already a multi-billion-dollar industry. But the industry does not sell yacon. It sells FOS extracted from chicory root, processed in European factories, purified through industrial hydrolysis, packaged in capsules, powders, and fortified foods, and marketed globally as a prebiotic supplement. Beneo, a subsidiary of the Südzucker Group, the largest sugar producer in Europe, controls approximately 70% of the global chicory-derived inulin and FOS market. Their annual revenue from inulin products alone exceeds $500 million. They grow chicory on industrial farms in Belgium. They extract the FOS through multi-stage processing. They patent the delivery systems. They sell it to food manufacturers who add it to yogurt, protein bars, breakfast cereals, and fiber supplements. You pay for it in every product labeled high fiber or contains prebiotics. Yacon produces the same compound naturally, in a garden, without a factory, without extraction, without processing, without a patent. One plant, one growing season, 4 to 8 roots weighing up to a kilogram each. The raw FOS content of yacon ranges from 40 to 70% of dry weight, the highest concentration of fructooligosaccharides in any plant ever measured. Higher than chicory, higher than Jerusalem artichoke, higher than any source the supplement industry currently uses. But yacon cannot be warehoused for months. It cannot be processed into shelf-stable capsules without destroying the living prebiotic structure that makes it work. It cannot be standardized into a dosage form that regulatory agencies approve and insurance companies reimburse. It cannot generate recurring revenue because it regrows from the same rootstock every year without new seed, without new purchase, without any transaction at all. The supplement industry does not oppose yacon. They do not lobby against it. They do not fund studies discrediting it. They ignore it. Ignoring is cheaper than opposing and infinitely more effective. No headlines, no controversy, no record of suppression, just silence. A root that could replace a $7 billion prebiotic supplement market does not appear in a single American grocery chain, a single USDA research program, or a single mainstream nutritional guideline. Meanwhile, diabetes is destroying American health at a pace that should be treated as an emergency. 37 million diagnosed, 96 million pre-diabetic, 1 in 3 adults on a path toward a disease that amputates limbs, destroys kidneys, and blinds. The cost of insulin in the United States has risen 1,200% since 1999. A single vial of Humalog that costs $21 to manufacture sells for $274 in American pharmacies. Americans spend $412 billion per year managing diabetes through pharmaceuticals, monitoring equipment, and clinical intervention. The industry built around this disease is not structured to find solutions that grow in dirt. Japan understood this 40 years ago. After Tsukihashi brought those first 3 crates back in 1985, Japanese agricultural scientists did what American institutions refused to do. They studied it seriously. They bred improved varieties with higher FOS content and smoother skin for easier peeling. They developed low-temperature processing methods for yacon syrup and yacon tea that preserved the living prebiotic compounds other drying methods destroyed. By 1990, the first commercial yacon fields were planted in Hokkaido. By 2000, yacon tea had become one of the best-selling health beverages in Japanese convenience stores. In 2003, a national television health program featured yacon, and demand surged so fast that suppliers across the country sold out within a single week. Farmers who had planted small trial plots found themselves fielding calls from distributors offering contracts for the following season. Today, yacon products fill shelves in Japanese health food stores alongside familiar staples. Farmers across Hokkaido, Kyushu, and Shikoku grow it in rotation with rice and sweet potato. The Japanese government funded breeding research, universities published cultivation guides, agricultural cooperatives distributed planting stock to new growers. A nation with one of the lowest diabetes rates in the developed world adopted a Peruvian root that lowers blood sugar. The nation with one of the highest diabetes rates in the world has never put it on a grocery shelf. New Zealand followed Japan in the 1990s. Czech Republic followed. Brazil expanded production across its southern states. Peru now exports yacon syrup to 14 countries across Europe and Asia. The global yacon market is growing at 8% annually. But in North America, the root remains invisible. No USDA research funding, no agricultural extension programs teaching farmers to grow it, no breeding trials improving it for American climates, no seed distribution networks, no grocery store placement, nothing. You can order yacon tubers from exactly 3 specialty nurseries in the United States. You can grow them in USDA zones 5 through 11, which covers most of the continental country. Plant the crown pieces in spring after the last frost. Give them loose, well-drained soil in a spot that gets full sun. They grow like sunflowers, tall and fast, requiring nothing but occasional water during dry spells. No fertilizer, no pesticide, no staking. In October, when the first frost kills the tops and the leaves collapse, dig around the base carefully, 4 to 8 roots per plant. Each one crisp, sweet, and ready to eat raw the moment you brush the soil away. Peel it, hold it up to the light. The flesh is translucent, almost golden, wet with juice before you even cut it. Bite into it. The taste is closer to a pear than a potato. Juicy, mild sweetness with a light floral note that lingers. Eat it raw in salads alongside citrus and arugula. Slice it thin with lime juice and chili powder the way families do in Lima and Cusco. Grate it into coleslaw for crunch. Blend it into smoothies for body and natural sweetness. Or cook the syrup the way Andean communities have for centuries. Slow boil the extracted juice until it thickens into a dark amber liquid that tastes like molasses, but does not raise blood sugar. Use it instead of maple syrup on pancakes, instead of honey in tea, instead of agave in baking. Diabetics in Peru have been doing exactly this for generations. Save the crown. The small reddish rhizome cluster at the top of the root mass, where the stems emerge, is the propagation piece. Separate it from the edible roots. Store it in slightly damp soil or sawdust over winter. Plant it again in spring. 1 crown produces a full plant next season. 1 plant produces enough crowns to share with 4 neighbors. Within 3 years, a single yacon purchase becomes an entire neighborhood's supply. No seed company involved. No annual purchase required. No patent. No license. No dependency. The sugar industry sells $100 billion worth of product every year. The artificial sweetener industry adds another $7 billion. The prebiotic supplement industry adds $7 billion more. The diabetes pharmaceutical industry extracts $412 billion annually from patients managing a condition that diet and gut health could prevent. Combined, over $500 billion in annual revenue flows through systems that depend on you believing sweetness must be manufactured. Gut health requires factory-produced capsules, and managing blood sugar demands pharmaceutical intervention costing thousands of dollars per year. Growing between 11,000-foot terraces in the Andes right now, in the same soil where Inca farmers planted it 1,000 years ago, a root offers sweetness without sugar, prebiotic power without pills, and blood sugar management without prescriptions. It feeds over 100 million people across South America. It fills grocery shelves in Tokyo and Osaka. It grows in any American backyard that gets 6 hours of sun. But you have never heard its name. Not because it failed, not because the science is uncertain, not because it does not grow in your climate. Because it succeeded without generating a single dollar of recurring revenue for the corporations, the lobbyists, and the industries that decide what appears on your plate and what never reaches it. The root is still in the ground. It has been sweet for 1,000 years. It does not need a factory to process it. It does not need a corporation to distribute it. It does not need a prescription to access it. It just needs hands willing to dig and a mouth willing to taste what empires overlooked and industries cannot own. If this story opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next story opens soon.